Now to the business at hand. We go up to Knoxville and say hello to Tony Basilio for his weekly visit. Tony, what's going on?
Man, I'm fired up, George. Great to see you.
Hey, by the way, no Kelly today. He's up toward Lookout Mountain traveling back. So no go.
We wish him well. We're going to miss him.
So before we get to Tennessee, you were a Phillies fan when Pete Rose was a Philly, or at least I think you were.
Oh, yeah.
What are the thoughts in Philly today on his passing?
I mean, he's a legend there, George. You know, he'll always be remembered as the guy that brought the first World Series championship to Philadelphia in forever. I mean, it was the early 1900s. And I remember as a little kid listening to the news station when the Phillies won the first game when they made the World Series, and they beat Houston in an epic series. They had a huge comeback.
Unbelievable series.
Back then it was 5 games of the NLCS and 4-run comeback in the 8th inning. They beat Nolan Ryan, to get there. And it was crazy. After falling short for so many years, and a couple years they won 100 games or close to it and would just go down in a whimper in the postseason. And Pete Rose showed him how to win. I mean, they got him when he was 39 years old. And he literally, like Mike Schmidt to this day says, hey, he taught our baseball team. He showed us how to win. And he's always revered in Philadelphia as being that guy.
Weird story. Apparently he was in Franklin, Tennessee Sunday doing a card show and gone 24 hours later. In your opinion, will he get posthumously into the Baseball Hall of Fame?
It's a vindictive bunch, George, and it is a no, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I think those guys, George, are extremely they play favorites, and Pete Rose wasn't one of their favorites. Pete Rose was like a very talented but flawed cousin that baseball had to tolerate. But those guys play favorites. I mean, George, they keep guys out for political reasons now. So I don't know. It just, again, to me, though, if you're asking me, I personally, for the longest time, I thought there's no way he belongs in the Hall of Fame. But, with all this gambling in sports now, I was looking up today because I remember this from my childhood. You talk about, and I was there. I saw this. When Atlantic City brought gambling online after their city had cratered in the late 70s, I distinctly remember waking up one day and in 1979, the commissioner of the league suspending both Willie Mays and the second guy, Mickey Mantle.
Yes.
And all they were was greeters. These guys were literally greeting people in, in a situation where they weren't even like gambling. And they were way past their playing days, but they disassociated themselves from baseball. And now we have gambling windows, like in Cincinnati Red Stadium, we have a gambling window.
As the former Alabama baseball coach would know.
Yes. Hey, by the way, he wants Pete Rose to get into the Hall of Fame.
I'm sure he does. Yeah. Yes, I'm sure he does. So, an off week for Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Do you think it came at a good time? And what do you think they tried to accomplish?
It's coming at a good time for my Eagles. With Tennessee, I think you would rather have that week a little later on, but you get a couple of them now on the schedule, so it is what it is. I think the goal this week, George, is to grow the passing game, to grow Nico in the passing game. And I would expect that's going to be their focus this week. This Arkansas bunch really struggles physically with their offensive line. Their starting quarterback, Taylon Green, is a talented kid from a transfer from Boise who made some plays. He's made some noise so far. And made some plays last week against A&M, but not enough. And, he's a runaround guy. and he really needs to run around behind that offensive line. He wears number 10, which is appropriate, George, because I think Tennessee is going to get north of 10 TFLs on Arkansas's offense. When you put the sacks and the tackles for loss together, they might sack him 7 or 8 times. And he's a reckless guy. And it's not going to surprise me if this poor kid gets helped off the field, George, because, he's like one of those young guys in the NFL. Those guys don't protect themselves. And when you play a defense like Tennessee's, you better, as Buzz Peterson used to say, he misused this term, but you better keep your head on a swizzle.
My good friend Buzz Peterson, man.
Tell Mark Griffin that. Head on a swizzle.
I will tell him that. So, on one hand, on paper, Tennessee's way better than Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
But you could also say Missouri's way better than Vandy. You could say Ole Miss way better than Kentucky. One got taken to double overtime, should have been triple OT. The other didn't get out alive. Do you think there will be a performance like that with Tennessee where they just don't really mentally show up?
There has to be. It's college football. There has to be. Everybody does it. Alabama did it earlier in the year with South Florida, 2 years in a row, under 2 different head coaches. So, there has to be. It's the way this thing works. The Arkansas series, George, is weird because Tennessee hasn't won there. I think 2001 is the last time they won. Now, they play there intermittently, and they play this series intermittently, so that's kind of deceiving. But the Arkansas series, since Arkansas has come into the league 30 years ago, when they get on the field with Tennessee, some of the strangest football games. That was the gateway for the Vols when they won the national championship in 98.
The Clint Sterner play.
Yeah, and both those teams were 8-0. And I remember that like it was yesterday. It was a kind of a spitting rainy day, November day in Knoxville. Sterner and those guys, their passing game was really, really good. At that time, Houston Nutt was a hot young coach. They were coming off a losing season the year before. He was in his first year. They came out of nowhere, and that was an amazing game. The game that Tennessee won. Go ahead.
Well, Clint ended up being a Nashville Cat at one point.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And I talked to him some about it, because can you imagine what he must have felt like? Because that play, it basically beat them, and it allowed Tennessee the chance to go after a national title.
Mm-hmm. I've often wondered, Arkansas, if they hang on and win that game, what happens? Is it them? Because I was talking with a guy from Arkansas today. I'm reading a book right now by Michael McCambridge, who's a really great sports historian type guy. It's a book about the 70s, about how everything, when sports in the 70s, from the 60s to the 70s, everything changed. The reserve clause was wiped out. Free agency didn't come to the NFL till the 90s, but it came in baseball then. And some of the things that we know now that are common in sport happened then. Right. But in that book, it talked about how Arkansas and Texas in 1969, President Nixon in an election year went down to Texas with a plaque and was going to.
He sure did.
Was going to declare that he wanted everybody to say, "Hey, I love sports. I love football. Vote for me." And
I am not a crook.
Hey, George, Arkansas at that time was like a household name in college football. Think about how far off the radar they are in the SEC. Way off the radar.
Go back 5 years before that with an offensive lineman named Jerry Jones.
Mm-hmm.
They won a national title.
That's wild. That's small worldy. The other thing that's interesting, too, about Arkansas is they play that game every year with A&M and Jerry's World, and neither fan base really wants it. Both of those fan bases would rather have a home game. This is only Arkansas's second home game of the season, George.
Is that wow? So
very strange.
Have you paid any attention to this thing that Jimmy Haslam is in the middle of?
You mean destroying the Cleveland Browns?
Well, no,
We're talking about this college football thing.
You're right.
Not really, because I don't know, George, that he has the ear of the commissioners of those leagues, and those commissioners of those leagues are not going to give up control of their teams. So Jimmy ought to stick to just his team and what he does, because he's really bad at fantasy football. I can't imagine college football fantasy what Jimmy has. In fact, since he got out of the way here and just like gives us money, things have taken off. Tennessee's ascended. So we like Jimmy. Yeah.
Here's why I brought this up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In his deal, he's got 72 schools that he says are power conference schools, and that they divided into this crazy thing. Mid-South, under that is Alabama, Auburn, Kentucky, Louisville, Tennessee, and Vandy.
Mm-hmm.
And then under the South, LSU, Arkansas, Houston, Memphis, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. That's the first thing I've ever seen that puts Memphis in Power 5 kind of stock.
You know, as a kid say, George, you spent like a hot minute there.
Yes.
It looks to me like Memphis is going to be, when all this stuff shuffles eventually out, you know, I just don't see a spot for them in the deal. Do you?
No, when Fred Smith's money didn't buy their way into the Pac-12, the Big 12.
That's right.
What was it, 3-4 years ago?
That's right.
Unfortunately, and this may be unfair, but the place has a renegade image, most of it coming from basketball. And I think a lot of the conferences have just sort of backed away going, we're not going there. They're more trouble than they're worth.
You know, I don't know if that's it or if it's just not meant to be. But for some reason, George, it just seems not meant to be for Memphis in football. And you know what's interesting is these, like Temple's done this. These schools, because it's all about football, right? So these schools that sacrifice everything for their football program, your basketball program really suffers, because then you end up in a deal where you're in a displaced league.
Right.
You lost all your natural rivalries. The old Metro Conference was great in basketball.
Oh, it was the one I was in.
It was great.
That's what Memphis State was.
Yeah.
When I was there for my, what did you call it?
A hot minute.
Hot minute. By the way, let's get Billy in here because he's going to get a little bit of airtime.
I love him.
Billy, when was the last time you sent Tony a resume?
It's been a little bit. I think it was after Tony Vitello won a national title. So tried to strike when the iron was hot.
Did he get back to you on that? Sorry.
It hasn't gotten back yet.
Interesting.
He called collect and Billy wasn't accepting.
Interesting.
Billy, do you have anything to share in this conversation?
I do. Tony, after watching Alabama and Georgia Saturday night, I think Tennessee can do the exact same thing Alabama did to Georgia. Now it's in Athens. So in Georgia, you know, they could be pissed off the rest of the season and go unbeaten and you know, win the national title. For you, are you happy that Georgia lost that game, or is there part of you going, now they're going to be pissed off, ready to go against Tennessee and Athens? Because I think Tennessee matches up well. I mean, if they spread it out and throw it to those receivers, I think they can do just what Alabama did.
I picked Alabama in that game last week because I just thought they had more playmakers. I do think Georgia identified some playmakers late in that game. I like the fact that Alabama bills this Williams guy, like they say he's 17. I want to see his birth certificate. Was he playing baseball like in Central America as a kid? I mean, no offense. Like Juan Soto. Hello, are you there? You know, in terms of this, that matchup, Tennessee's interesting because here we are, we're in October, and they still really haven't been tested. And the way their schedule's falling, Arkansas, they are going to fold up Arkansas, Billy. And then they're going to play Florida, which generally would be a test. But Florida's somewhere out to sea right now. And so really, Tennessee's first test on both lines of scrimmage is going to be that Alabama game. And I think the Vols are very good. I think the Vols are up there among the elite. How elite they are, we're going to find out. Because the only way Tennessee doesn't make a playoff from here is, like George said, is to slip up in a spot where you're not expecting it. Because if they go 10-2, they're going to get in. And they're going to get in comfortably. And if they can beat either Georgia or Alabama, they'll host. But back to your original question, I'm not sure which was a better result, because if Georgia would have gotten run away from, that could have crushed their spirit. Because they still have a road game with Ole Miss. They still have a road game with Texas. And boy, that Texas-Georgia game in a couple weeks is going to be absolute fire. That is going to be fire. Because Georgia is not going to just cede their spot, as we know, guys. They're just not. And, this whole thing, the way it shakes out to me is that, Tennessee, for the first time in a long time, has a real serious opportunity to maybe win one of these things. And I mean, like, win the whole thing. There's a guy who sent me, a listener of ours, Eric in South Georgia, sent me something I'm going to run on the blog tomorrow. And he kind of compares this team to the Tennessee baseball team of a couple years ago that just kept ascending. And there are some interesting comparisons. It's fun around here again, guys, because of the possibilities. It really is.
Sure. Winning is fun.
Yeah.
Hey, Billy, put that question up there from Chester. And because I'm not sure I know where this is going. What is a copper card?
That must be one of my listeners hazing our promotions department, which would be me, George. That's our promotion. So
Right.
maybe Chester won himself a copper card, or I have a lot of listeners who will just razz me and say, hey, I'm still waiting on my prize, because that's sort of a little gimmick. Because, George, I've been
The prize closet is small.
Well, I've been known to welch on some I mean, I don't do it on purpose. Like, my heart is there, George. I'm just so damn overworked. Look at me.
But the envelope and the stamp are not.
Yes, exactly.
So I used to say this on the air. I was once at a bankrupt radio station.
Right.
Back in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And I said this one day on the air, that what I ought to do to get everybody's attention is say, okay, this prize is a trip to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Name all 54 teams that have won it in order. Go.
There you go.
That's something that nobody could.
Right. Yeah. Because when you're I've been at those stations where you're just scrimping by and you just hope to get paid, Right. Never one like you were. I mean, you guys literally were in bankruptcy, which
we were for like 3 years.
Yeah, you stuck around the radio gig like we have long enough, and you've got enough you meet more characters. Yes. In fact, George, we have one in common, and I'm not going to say his name on here, but
okay.
But you had shared with me and my lovely wife the last time we sat down that we had one of these characters in common. I tell that gentleman that his copper card from the Copper Cellar family of restaurants,
of course,
is in the mail.
Absolutely.
It is in the mail.
Yes. So we had a deal, Tony, when we were in bankruptcy, mm-hmm. that we had to, the station ended up with a hearing in bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm in the back, and I'm obviously not a part of it. And this lawyer gets up and he says, this station only has one asset. And he points back to me. And I'm sitting there thinking, if this is your asset, you are, out of luck.
Well, hey, speaking of assets, hey, Billy, I got to ask you now, has the level of discourse first bit of the show today, has it been higher absent Kelly Holcomb's presence, in your opinion?
Way higher. It's been astronomically higher.
Just checking. I was thought of you guys last night when the Titans got that. First of all, I was sitting there thinking to myself, why am I watching this? This is spring league level football. And those two teams going off. No offense to the UFL, but and then George, when they had that sequence where the kick got blocked, and then the kid from the Dolphins didn't know the rule and went to reach for the ball because he thought,
yeah.
I'm sitting there going,
Leon Lett,
the worst football I've ever witnessed. I mean, what are we doing?
It's Leon Lett.
Well,
and for those younger that do not remember,
yes,
on Thanksgiving Day of whatever year it was, like 92 or 93, the Cowboys block what is a codlock cinch field goal from about 30, and the thing's rolling around. It had snowed and it'd been a big ice day in Dallas, and Leon Lett goes to jump on the ball, and of course it goes flying. Miami recovers. They kick the field goal, and Jimmy's hair moved.
I mean, that's the breaking news. Only 2 times Jimmy's hair ever moved. Jimmy Johnson is when he got pelted with ice balls in Philly, and that day. So, otherwise, you know, are the Titans back, guys? Have you proclaimed that in the first? Have you used the B word?
Absolutely, George? Not. No.
Okay, just checking.
No, this is a nice win in that it's a win. How do you get into the radio industry?
Amen.
Okay. The answer is get out before you get in. No, it is not. No, I mean, it's a win and it'll do some good in the locker room, but it's not the one where you say, okay, they're headed on a roll. Here we go. Get on the train.
I don't get why you wouldn't start Mason. I know Will Levis is the face of the franchise per se, but how can your face of the franchise be a guy that's a meme on Twitter every week? Like I think I've seen enough from Levis, Tony, and Rudolph. We talked about it. He went in there and the operation looked smoother, and so I'm a Mason Rudolph guy.
I was talking with a buddy and I forgot the game was on. He goes, "You have this game on?" I said, "No." He said, "Man, you got to flick this thing on." This interception he just threw, he just stuck a ball between a guy's legs. I said, "Come on, man." I said, "What do you mean by that?"
He did.
He threw the ball so hard at him that it hit him in his legs and it just stuck there. He said, "I've never." I mean, where did this Levis guy come from? This guy has invented ways.
Well, it was like the defender had Velcro. But we must get to the important issues. Your broadcast plans for Saturday night.
Man, all these night games.
They're killing you.
I mean, look at me. I ain't getting any younger over here. George, so we will be on tclub.team is how people find us, or you can find us on Twitter. We have a raw feed on Twitter. You can hear what's going on behind the scenes, but we have a lot of fun. And tclub.team, we're on as soon as the game's over. We're on tomorrow live. We will have a blog tomorrow. tclub.team, if you check it out, it shows you everything we're doing. And to that gentleman, your copper card, my friend, is in the mail. Trust me.
It absolutely. Now, is it Federal Express or Pony Express?
A combination, George, of the two.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it.
Hey, hockey season, George, almost here, man.
I know it. A week from Thursday is the opener.
And the Preds went all in. The Preds went all in this year, and I think my Flyers are going to be a little better. So we've got one of the great young stars in the NHL, Michkov from Russia. We're excited.
And I'm working on it.
Thank you, brother.